Tonight, a KXAN investigation takes our team hundreds of miles from the state capitol to the plains of West Texas,
You've actually got to get on the ground and go get them.
searching for proof.
This is probably the most critical document of the entire day.
Inside a massive industry pumping billions of tax dollars into your schools, roads, and recovery each year.
It's the oil or nothing around here.
A vast oil empire of money,
There needs to be transparency. There needs to be disclosure.
power,
What I saw was clearly appearance of bias.
and ethics.
There's only 3 of us, and we regulate the biggest industry in the state.
Those 3 leaders elected statewide make up the Texas Railroad Commission.
Perhaps the most powerful government agency in Texas, it has a misleading name. Has nothing to do with railroads, but everything to do with regulating Texas oil and gas.
The commission's chair, Christy Craddock, is up for re-election next month. And in her first term, her well-known family profited off of oil companies linked to her own votes on the commission.
Corporate interests kept quiet until KXAN investigator Jody Barr started digging.
If you're really quiet and hold your breath, you can stand pretty much anywhere in West Texas and hear the heartbeat of the Texas economy. It's a 24/7 operation, and lots of people are striking black gold right now.
Oh, yeah.
Like Sergio Ortiz.
You see the dollars rolling here, right? Yes, sir.
He's become one of the most popular men in this West Texas oil patch. His family owns this tire repair shop in the town of Big Lake, a shop he almost closed 3 years ago when the oil boom busted.
There have been some pretty downtimes that it's been where I don't know if we want to be doing this anymore. Me and my wife actually had to sit down and think about, like, is it worth it?
Now, as the U.S. oil supply shifts in Texas's favor, this area is seeing some of the highest per barrel prices in years. The Ortiz family can tell it too. They can barely stock enough tires to keep up with the tens of thousands of trucks rolling through each day.
It's the oil or nothing around here.
This meeting, the Railroad Commission of Texas, will come to order.
Christy Craddock is the first Craddock to chair the Railroad Commission, but the family name spans decades in Texas government.
Have all voted members.
Her father, Tom Craddock, was the Texas House Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, members, back to my explanation.
Today, he's Midland's state representative. The Craddock oil businesses go back just as far, with oil interests spread across 22 Texas counties. Records we found show Christy Craddock holds potentially millions of dollars in oil interests. Not that surprising. It's what she's voted on as chair of this regulatory body that got our attention. Our investigative team traveled into the heart of Craddock country. We made the trip because tracking the family's oil interests is complicated, since only a couple counties post the records for the public to see online. We drove a few thousand miles, made stops in a dozen West Texas courthouses, searched through decades of land and oil records, and uncovered evidence that Christy Craddock and her family are doing personal business with many of the oil companies she regulates from her seat of power. Like in January.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Those items are approved.
Craddock voted on a rule change, easing restrictions on this Reagan County oil field known as Ringo 9. County records show Tom and Christy Craddock own mineral rights in this field through 2 separate companies, Craddock Partners Limited and Christy Craddock's personal company, Quarry LLC. The Ringo 9 wells produced 58,000 barrels of oil in the past year. By our calculations, these wells pumped out around $5 million in oil and gas production. Railroad Commission records show Craddock did not disclose her interest in this well.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Those items are approved.
That's just one of the cases we found.
Approved. Those items are approved. Motion passes. Items approved. Thank you.
State records show Commissioner Craddock also voted on rule changes to help produce more oil in different oil leases and oil fields across Texas, where the Craddocks own mineral interests. Christy Craddock's annual financial filing shows several different oil operators paying the Craddocks tens of thousands of dollars each year. Those filings also show the Craddocks own stock in some operators. Those same companies brought business before the Railroad Commission.
Those items are approved.
Archive video shows Christy Craddock cast votes in favor of those same companies. Since 2014, Craddock voted more than 400 times on agendas related to those companies, and records show no evidence Craddock ever disclosed her ties. As an ethics advocate, what do you think when you see that?
What I saw was clearly appearance of bias, at least. Commissioners are voting on matters that they have financial stakes in.
Adrian Shelley heads Texas Public Citizen, a government ethics watchdog group.
Sunset Commission has a quorum.
Shelley's group spent hours testifying before the Texas Sunset Advisory Commission in 2013. It determines whether a state agency like the Railroad Commission is doing an efficient and honest job for the people of Texas. Shelley's group found evidence they say shows railroad commissioners' political campaigns were funded mostly by oil companies they regulate. In some cases, those companies gave campaign cash, even while the commissioners were making decisions involving those companies. Did you have an idea at that time that the oil interest, when it came to Christy Craddock, was as vast as it turns out to be?
You know, I'm surprised to learn what I've learned based on your investigations. I don't want to see these sorts of specific holdings from a commissioner that create the appearance of bias that I've seen here.
We made multiple attempts to interview Commissioner Craddock and her father and business partner, Representative Tom Craddock. Neither agreed to interview. We found Commissioner Craddock at a September Railroad Commission meeting and sat up front to wait for the meeting to end. Craddock usually stays after meetings to sign orders, but this time she bolted.
This meeting will Commissioner's adjourned. Thank you.
Craddock rushed out a back door before we could even ask her a question. Ms. Craddock. We also checked the financial holdings of Craddock's fellow commissioners, Wayne Christian and Ryan Sitton. Outside of campaign contributions, our investigation did not find they're in business with oil companies. Commissioner Wayne Christian says his only investments are in general mutual funds.
I own no oil interest, very few royalty, none, no royalty interest of any kind, no lease interest. So I wish I did have a bunch of oil and gas investments.
If you could buy that, would you buy that today and serve on this commission?
I'd probably have to question that very close with my attorney and the ethics attorney. I have an ethics attorney. I would pass it by them, make sure that I'm following the rules and regulations, but I have no interest in doing that.
Commissioner Ryan Sitton doesn't even want the perception he has a conflict of interest. Is it hard to separate yourself from this industry if you were financially tied to pieces of that industry?
I just don't want people out there asking those questions.
When we ask him about a scenario like Craddock's,
if I'm voting on an item and I own direct interest in that item, a well, a disposal process, anything, a pipeline, then yes, that would be a conflict of interest.
Some of what I have seen today is evidence for exactly why we need ethics reform. And I think that lawmakers who see that evidence will think hard about what needs to be done at the Railroad Commission. We need folks who are willing to take a stand against that. The status quo is not enough here in Texas.
Commissioner Craddock's staff sent a statement saying the sole purpose of each of Chairman Craddock's votes has been to ensure the enhancement and safe operations of the Texas energy industry, preventing waste and protecting correlative rights. Any suggestion to the contrary is entirely without merit, unconfirmed by her voting record, and unreflective of her integrity. Her father wrote to us he has 2 small working interests that he's owned for 40 plus years. The rest of his interests are minerals and overriding royalty interests, which have no say or conflict with the operations or permitting of the oil and gas property. But after living in Midland since the 1950s and becoming the longest serving lawmaker in state history, it's no surprise Tom Craddock is a big deal in West Texas oil. Robert and Sydney?
Yes, Jody, and we know he was even inducted into the Petroleum Hall of Fame just months after his daughter was elected to the Railroad Commission.
We asked several times for an interview, but he refused to speak with us, even at this event in Austin. But what we've uncovered now has a different state lawmaker saying a lot.
Back at the Capitol, some lawmakers are questioning the relationships between the state's most powerful regulators and the industry they regulate.
Sometimes simply the appearance of impropriety undermines the effectiveness of the regulator.
Representative Rafael Anchia was part of the 2013 Sunset Commission, a legislative panel charged with making sure state agencies are working efficiently. Sunset recommended separating the three commissioners from oil and gas companies. Government watchdogs told lawmakers that nearly 70% of the Railroad Commissioners' campaign cash came from the oil and gas companies they regulate. And some of that cash came from the people connected to active cases the commission was in the middle of deciding. Commissioner Christy Craddick told Anchia during the 2013 Sunset she didn't need a law for her to do the right thing.
I think the question is why, if we are capable of self-policing, why should we be treated differently than other non-judicial statewide? Because I think we should self-police, and I think we are ethical and able to self-police, which is the important part of this.
Do you believe this self-policing mentality is working with this commission?
Well, look, I was very skeptical of that argument from the Railroad Commission back in 2013 when they said, just let us guard the hen house, okay? And we don't need any rules governing that. It is in human nature to have the incentive, in their case, to make money. I get that, right? But if you're going to be engaging in these private businesses and at the same time maintaining this public charge, you owe it to the public to disclose that.
To see if that was happening, we headed to West Texas, searching a dozen courthouses for railroad commissioner names in stacks of mineral rights. We found more than 600 properties in 22 counties connected to Craddick and her family's oil interests.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Those items are approved. Approved. Those items are approved. Those items are approved.
We also found more than 400 times when Craddick voted on agenda items dealing with oil companies that her financial filings show pay her and her father oil royalties directly. That's not something the Sunset Commission knew during their 2013 reform efforts. Knowing this now, what do you plan to do in 2019?
I'm going to be filing bills that are tough on disclosure, transparency, elimination of conflicts, all the things that I've been fighting for since 2013, and I'm going to make sure that they are brought to the forefront and get done this session.
Texas law allows railroad commissioners to have oil and gas interests, but the law requires they disclose those conflicts on the record. That means they're supposed to tell the public about it during these public meetings, and they're not supposed to cast a vote. But in 4 years of commission minutes, we found no on-the-record disclosure. That would be breaking the law up north across the Red River. How personally involved, financially involved can they be in the industry they regulate?
Not at all.
50 years ago, Oklahoma lawmakers banned their commissioners from having any interest in or financing any company they regulate. Lawmakers there also banned commission staffers from taking anything from anyone they regulate, right down to a cup of coffee. What is the state of Oklahoma trying to prevent?
Number one, you're trying to prevent any kind of question, and then telling the elected official you can't have any interest, period. I don't know how you would get any tougher than that.
That's not a step the Texas legislature's shown any interest in taking. If it's good for Oklahoma, why is it not good for Texas?
I think what Oklahoma has done is just basic good government and good governance. We should be able to adopt something like that here in Texas. The question is political will. We should be able to get this done in Texas, and I'm hopeful that the legislature has a political will to do it.
Fellow Railroad Commissioner Ryan Sitton sat down with us for this investigation. He said the way he avoids conflicts of interest, he created a blind trust. That's where a trustee invests for him, and he does not know where that money is being invested. But he's the only one of the 3 railroad commissioners who has something like that.
And Jody, state law says that if anyone suspects Craddick has broken the law, that they could file a complaint or a lawsuit.
That's right, Sydney. And the Attorney General could also file suit if there's a violation found. She could be removed from office.
Representative Anchia, from your story, promises he'll file a new bill next year, and we know you'll stay on top of any new developments for us. Jody, thanks so much.